Hello again, Michael here. Yeah, here I'm going to show some of the basics of how to turn a flat two-dimensional drawing into something like this, a three-dimensional drawing. There are some basics to go over. I won't go too deeply into an object. This is a little bit too complex to draw in a sort of a 5-minute video, so I'll try and make something fairly simple. My Y video explained going from the three views, the two elevations and a plan view, into a perspective. This is an isometric style sketch. Okay. What I'm going to explain now is the 2-point perspective, which is, hang on, let's grab the drawing back. This guy here, you can see that all lines going, let's call this the x-axis, all the x-axis lines converge to a point off to the upper left, and all the, let's call it the y-axis, all those lines converge off to the right, the upper right, and all the verticals are parallel. Depending on the shape, you may even have those tapering down to a converging point. So you see the style of that versus the isometric, where all lines are parallel. You've got convergent lines versus parallel lines. Now, 2-point perspective is what's used mostly in furniture drawing or the common things you see around. Okay, so this was the plan view of a, well, I'm going to call it a kitchen island unit arrangement. This is one view. I'm going to draw for the customer a perspective from this corner. The perspective shown here was that corner. Now I'll just draw a simple block view of that so that you can get a bit of a feeling for how it might work. Now, you've got to perceive where the viewer is looking from. If an object is going to be the same height as the viewer, the top edge of the object would be parallel with the viewer's eye. If the object was twice the height of the viewer, you'd have it, so let's just draw a couple of examples here. If an object was drawn with lines converging like so, your perceived eye line will be here, which would also be one of those convergent lines. This object would be about half again taller than the viewer. If we fill that out as a block, I'll just show that as a clearer. So this object is taller than the viewer. Another object. If we drew it like this, very badly done. With these lines converging, they are converging off to, well, basically still in shot here, to about here and here, and the viewer's eye line will be there. So this is about half the height of the viewer. So when you're drawing perspective, it's worthwhile keeping in your mind what you're actually trying to show the viewer, and you need to give the viewer a fairly natural feeling perspective of the object you're drawing. The object I drew here had no relevant sizes. If it was, say, 5 meters tall, it would have this kind of effect on the top and bottom edge. If it was, say, 1 meter tall, it would be more like this. Okay. In the case of that counter that I drew a second ago, I showed you a second ago, that's about half the viewer's height. You can see the eye line will be about here, as the two convergent points are about in line with twice the height of the cabinet. Okay, so let's, actually, I'll just use the same side. I'll draw that other view just quickly. First thing to do is really start with some sort of datum line, something to work from. And I usually draw the front corner. Some sort of convergent lines, let's call that the floor line, and that'd be the eye line. And those lines would have to converge. The other, oops, too far. And don't be afraid to make a mistake. That's what the eraser's for. I would have mentioned earlier the weapons you need to perform such things. An inking pen for the final viewing, making it clear. Pencil in the first place to rough things out. Eraser to clean up any errors. Of course, the paper to draw on, and a smooth flat surface underneath the drawing. I've done that a bit roughly. That has to be perfectly done. Just do that for a second. A bit out. There we go. So that's the other view. And you can see that I'm making small corrections as I go along, as I perceive that it's not quite right. You'll have your own opinions looking at it. So that's kind of the top detail as shown in the plan. If you imagine that sitting kind of diagonally. That is actually representative of a notch cut out for a wall. So there's a wall coming out of the building there and a floor line. So this is actually a component of the building, a wall. This goes off into an open space. So there you have the fundamentals of that shape. Okay. So I'll leave there. So there we've made the primary shape of that object to give us something to work from. We'll come back later. What is very important when you're drawing a perspective is to remember that every item has some thickness. It's very easy to overlook that detail, and it's a commonly overlooked point when people are sketching things up. I have customers bring me drawings where they've simply drawn, I'll get an example happening, where they draw a shelf unit as best they can, and they want to have, there's the bench top, let's say, and they want to have divided up and maybe a couple of shelves, and they simply say maybe 4 doors and maybe a kick or something underneath. They'll have a very simple drawing like that. Then they say, you know, this is 30 centimetres and that's 40 centimetres and so forth. But they haven't allowed the thickness of the uprights. And so they have the impression that 30 centimetres plus 40 centimetres plus 30 centimetres in fact equals a metre. That's the perception. But the reality is, if they are internal dimensions, the unit would have to be larger than a metre. So often if they've allowed for some item to go inside, there's a confusion there, and I'm not sure whether I should be leaving that space inside or whether that's sort of a centre line, which side of the object is that. And you can get yourself into a bit of a pickle when you're trying to make sure things fit. If the space between two walls is say a metre and you're assuming these objects will fit inside, you have yourself caught. So it's worthwhile remembering that everything has a dimension, everything has a thickness. Okay, back to our little roughing out. Now, we'll start with the bench top. It's the actual only thing that's that size, the size of this block. Everything else is in from that line. So let's just put the bench top in. Try to be as smooth as I can here. Now the cabinet has a bit of an overhang, so it's actually in from that edge. Here the corners are basically in line with one another, so that doesn't really need to change. Here this is set back. So basically we brought these two surfaces in, and at the height of the kick we maintain that new depth. So just to clear that up, I'll get rid of the external line so we get rid of the confusion there. So as you can see, we've now got a new depth. I'll leave that vaguely in there so you can see where it came from. Alright, now with this, where's my plan view? Too many drawings. With this item we have a dishwasher and a hot water service. So in this there's going to be a cabinet with a hot water service, then there's going to be a dishwasher space. So I'll allow that in here. And again, I've got to allow the depth. Everything has a size to it. So let's say our dishwasher is going to sit in there. Whatever knobs and dials and bits and bobs it's got in it. So there's our dishwasher. Going here again, there's that sink. It's mounted in a bit of an odd way. That's all right. We can express that odd way here so that everyone understands how that works. A bit of a bowl. The sink bowl has got a bit of a curve to it, so let's draw that in. And whoops. And there's a drainer. On the far side there'll be the tap, which would be working with the sink. And you'd be surprised how simple and vague some of your details can be and still be fully expressed. Oh, there's the compressor. Okay, so we have a sink there. That's slightly out of perspective. They're not converging properly, those lines. So I've done something incorrect here. But still you can get the perception of, I will correct that, how things should be. I've done some fundamental errors here. That's more like that. Okay, here we go. Like I said, we've got a pencil for the purpose of correcting. That'll be better. Put a tap back in. And this is why it's very much worthwhile to get your corrections with pencil and come back with a ink pen later on when you're happy that everything's settled. Now, we have two equal width drawers shown here very vaguely, but objects nearer to the eye are obviously going to appear bigger. So instead of being half the distance along here, it'll actually be a little bit past half. So the far side will be a little bit narrower on the paper here, because it's perceived to be narrower in real life as it's further away from the viewer. And the drawers are configured something like this. Oops. And however perfect or imperfect your sketch is, it's still a lot more perceivable than a two-dimensional drawing, as you would have seen already. That plan view is very much less informative. Okay, so we have there's going to be a door here, simple handles, bow handles, same on the end. I'm being fairly rough here, but you can see very quickly that we've produced a detail. That's actually incorrect. Tidy that up again. We've very quickly produced a detail that is quite perceivable, easily perceived by the layperson without spending any mental effort on trying to perceive what it is or understand what it is. It's much more of a feeling structure rather than a calculation and comprehension process. Okay, so I'll link that in. I'll quite often leave my pencil lines rough because they're still a reference for when I'm drawing the ink line in. You don't have to obey your pencil lines with your ink. You can disregard them and draw a new line at another location, like I'm deliberately doing right now. So I wasn't quite happy with that depth. Up. Now, drawing lines freehand as straight as this might seem, I'm going to say, impossible to you. I've done this, a few times, so had a little bit of practice. And the lines don't have to be perfect, but it's worthwhile trying to do it in one line rather than stopping and starting if you can. With more practice, it gets easier. I'll leave the dishwasher on. Done. Now, the tap is in front of the bulk of the other side of the sink. So I'll draw the tap in first. There's usually a bit of a round flange. Spout. A little bit more detail here. So there you have that detail. So now we've got the pencil line as a guide behind for us to draw in our sink with the drainer. And it doesn't hurt to just stop short with the rear lines clear of the tap, because it'll highlight the tap. A couple of lines just to denote a little bit of a curve there. What am I missing? Handles. Now I'm just doing a very simple cheats way out bow handle type design. And it's amazing how very simple symbols will still show very clearly, even though incorrectly, will show clearly what you're trying to express. I think that looks pretty good. We'll put ourselves a bit of a dishwasher feature. Might just change its design a little bit. More. Hopefully my head hasn't been in the way too much here. Okay, so we've got our drawing inked in. So now it's just a matter of getting rid of the lines we don't want. And then it looks very neat and tidy. Or more neat and tidy at least. It's worthwhile always draw the eraser away from your stabilising hand. Push towards it a couple of times and you'll see what I mean. That's fairly clean. That didn't take too long. Okay, so there you have it. Oh, I might put some detail of the drainer, sink drainer in there. There we go. Okay, you can see now that I've dimensioned this drawing. With dimensioning, I find what works the best, well certainly I believe it works the best, and you use your own mind. It would be a common thing. You can see the dimensions here. I've kind of laid as if this is a wall, this is a floor. You can see I've written that dimension as if it was written on the floor. These dimensions are as if they were written on the wall, and this is actually as if it was on a vertical plane lining up with the bench top. The same sort of thing here. I've got this kind of lining up with that vertical plane. You can see how the numbers are kind of bent out of shape as if they were written on a vertical surface. So your brain connects the measurements together. If you were to write an alternative which was just the numbers flat, you can see I've actually done this once before, say 1200 written here, it disconnects from the drawing, whereas having the numbers follow the plane connects the user's mind with the the plane and the dimensions of the drawing, and it's much easier to perceive where the dimensions belong. I'm going to rub that back out again, put it back to ink. It's a bit of a smudge there. Okay, I think that's about that. Thank you.